So as you can see, we are recording this session. I want to let you know that, and that's why we muted the lines. You can utilize the chat feature on the right margin to submit questions and comments throughout this session, or you can simply press #5 on your own device, and that will unmute your line, and you can ask a question. If your camera is on, others can see you, so you might want to turn off your cameras as well. Please keep in mind that if you put this call on hold for any reason, everyone will also hear your hold music. So I would encourage you to keep your line muted, and if you need to take another call, simply hang up and rejoin the meeting. We've turned off the chimes, so that won't be an issue. And if you're experiencing an echo of any kind, it might be because your device is too close to your phone, or you're using a speakerphone, which will cause an echo in this tool. So our presenters here today are Tanya Waite, who is Partnership Manager here at Central Office. She received her BA from SUNY Potsdam and holds an MS in Legal Studies with a concentration in tech transfer from Albany Law School in coordination with RPI, and she holds an MBA in the New Venture track from the University at Albany. We also have Stephen Wood, who is the Assistant Director of Innovation Services here at Central Office. He holds a BA from Hamilton College, a JD in the Tech Commercialization Law program from Syracuse University College of Law, an MS in Electrical Engineering from Syracuse University, and an advanced LLM in Air and Space Law from Leiden University Law School. Stephen and Tanya have led many I-Corps and Nexus New York faculty and student teams through successful customer discovery and have served as team members in multiple projects. Customer discovery roles they have served with include entrepreneurial lead, industry mentor, and program observer. In addition, Stephen has served as a technical lead and was adjunct instructor of the New York City Regional Innovation Customer Discovery Node Program. Special guests today are Ann Baldwin, Director of Sponsored Research, SUNY Geneseo. Ann joined Geneseo in July of 2006, and she holds a BA in English from SUNY Binghamton, a Master's in Human Resources Administration from the University of Scranton, and a PhD in Neuroscience from the University of Wisconsin-Madison. We also have Betty Garcia-Mathewson, who is the Director of both the New York State Migrant Education Program Professional Development and Inclusion Resource Center and the Opening Doors Diversity Project at the Research Foundation SUNY Brockport. Most importantly, Betty developed and produced the Authentic Voices trilogy of training DVDs and educational resources, which provide a framework for creating the systematic capacity to communicate effectively across language differences. To move the Authentic Voices training towards commercialization, Betty has gone through the UNY I-Corp Customer Discovery Site Program, and Betty holds a BS in Social Theory, Social Structure, and Change from SUNY Empire State College and a Master of Arts in Organizational Development from the Union Institute and University of Vermont College. So without further ado, I am going to pass the stage over to Tanya and Stephen.
Thank you so much, Jamie. And thank you to our special guests, Ann Baldwin and Betty Garcia-Mathewson, for joining us today, as well as my co-presenter, Stephen Wood. So our learning objectives today are to understand customer discovery and its goals, how to use special techniques to conduct interviews and gather information from key stakeholders, how to identify potential customers, how to identify the problems and challenges that customers face, how you might solve them, how to transform insights into succinct communication to potential customers and partners, and to learn about available resources that would help you in these efforts. To start, we'll talk about why you're here today and the high impact of customer discovery, what customer discovery is, customer discovery in the tech transfer and sponsored program life cycles, the history of customer discovery. We'll go through some definitions, talk about how to identify customers, walk through some best practices, look at the business model canvas, and we'll talk about business model fit and MVP, or minimum viable prototype. And then we'll walk through some questions and provide resources and contact information.
Can you pause 1 second? They can't hear you.
Is anyone able to hear us?
I can hear you.
Yeah.
Okay, thanks, Kathy.
I can hear you. It's Betsy.
Okay, great.
All right, we're going to proceed then.
Okay.
I'll go run.
Okay, Jamie, you'll follow up with them.
Yeah.
Great. Thank you so much. Forward. Okay. So starting with why. The RF and SUNY support a number of startups, and as seen by this graph, university-affiliated startups are increasing. There's a lot of university support and involvement for startups. Why was customer discovery developed? It was developed mainly because startup companies or small developing businesses were failing at a rate of about 90%. And even with university support, they were still failing at a rate of about 60%. Customer discovery was developed to improve the startup success rate. And when we're talking about startups, please think about this as new projects that are just getting underway, not necessarily formed businesses yet. Further to understanding why startups were failing, they would start out with a number of, let's say, C-level executives in the company, operate in stealth mode where they would develop a product in secret and then reveal the finished product essentially to the sound of crickets and no one wanting to buy the products. They were not getting feedback from potential customers as to what they were looking to buy, and they were hoping customers would just buy because of how great their technology or products were. Recognizing small companies could not operate the same as big companies, they began a collaborative effort between NSF, VentureWell, and Steve Blank, who Stephen will talk about later, and some others, was undertaken to develop a new model for startup success. Now, understanding why customer discovery was developed, we'd like to share what the value and high impact of customer discovery is to the RF and SUNY. The research that's conducted through customer discovery helps us confirm assumptions we have about a particular technology and how it provides a solution that meets society's needs. Often going through this process, it helps inventors and PIs make changes to their research in the lab or develop technology a different way with a particular product in mind. Most often, all the team members that go through this process learn a great deal about people who will use or buy their technology and what's important to them, enough so that the people will give money for it. This process is also high impact because it helps us develop licensing strategies and business plans. We'll often identify potential partners and licensees as part of this process. And in addition, core to the process is developing and iterating on the business model canvas, which you'll hear about later. And that assists inventors, PIs, sponsored program staff, tech transfer staff to understand essentially where the technology is headed and make plans to obtain further funding. Customer discovery also serves to strengthen proposals and obtain additional funding. We know from NSF that in 2015, the business or industry sector is a predominant source of funding for R&D in the U.S., having funded $333 billion in R&D, or 67% of the total U.S. R&D, with the federal government as the second largest source with R&D funding at 24%. So really, there's an opportunity here to build relationships and partnerships with industry by starting with customer discovery to grow industry-funded research. As well, there's another opportunity to increase funding with applied research. According to NSF, there has been an increase in applied research funding, which was up to 20% of the total funded R&D in the U.S. in 2015. So NSF states applied research is aimed at solving a specific problem or meeting a specific commercial objective. And customer discovery is the process that helps you figure out the specific problem or specific commercial objective. I recently attended an autumn startup business development course, and there I learned that the University of New Hampshire requires all their faculty to develop a business model canvas before they apply for any and all grants. As a result, their proposal success rate increased overall by 4 to 5%. So customer discovery also begins forming relationships with industry through these interviews. We have seen many examples of how these interviews lead to further conversations and public-private partnerships being formed with new industry partners. Lastly, customer discovery is an effective communication tool to building a compelling story and bridging the communication culture gap of the university and industry. Sometimes industry speaks a different language than we're used to, and honing in on a specific problem you have and how to message that in a concise one-page format is very effective and impactful. So what is customer discovery? Customer discovery is a process of conducting research in a slightly different way than most of us are used to in a lab setting, for example. It's conducting research through customer interviews using the scientific method. You still make hypotheses and then test those hypotheses by talking to people with an end goal of trying to identify the specific problem that a technology or your research solves. I would encourage you to think about the term customer in this process very generally. Throughout the process, you'll be interviewing a number of individuals along the value chain or supply chain. They could be suppliers. They could make a small mechanical part that your nanotechnology goes into that is then built into a system. They may be the end user of a virtual reality game or a pharmaceutical company. So you want to understand the needs and problems in different places along the chain from where your technology is today or your research is today until it gets to the end user's hands. Customer discovery started as a process that entrepreneurs use to identify and validate scalable, repeatable, worthwhile business models. For those who aren't familiar with the term, an entrepreneur, according to businessdictionary.com, is someone who exercises initiative by organizing a venture or startup to take benefit of an opportunity. And in fact, we would say that many of you are probably entrepreneurs already in the performance of your research. There are multiple phases of the customer discovery process. This diagram is meant to showcase the process is messy and you may jump around, but generally you start with stating hypotheses and filling out a business model canvas. Then you get out of the building and go talk to potential customers in person, hopefully in person. You ask them open-ended questions to entice them to talk about their problems in an unbiased way without revealing your solution. And then in the third phase, when you're confident that you know the problem, you test how your solution matches or fits that problem, and then verify your value proposition. The final phase is verifying that customers agree with your value proposition and they're willing to pay for your solution. And sometimes they're not willing to pay for it, or they're willing to pay not quite enough, or essentially their problem isn't that bad, so you make a pivot to a different market application. So this is a simple graphic of the RF technology transfer process and where customer discovery fits in that process. Technology transfer starts when a creator or inventor makes a discovery or invention. Then it's disclosed to the tech transfer office, and we do an evaluation to essentially verify two things, marketability and protectability in the form of IP. Then once protection is underway, we move to this customer discovery process, which gives us the tools and communication needed to market the discovery and identify partners to ultimately commercialize the discovery. Here's an overview of the grant or award lifecycle from SUNY Fredonia. So customer discovery really occurs during the pre-award process, where you're trying to scope out what your project will be and what problems you're solving. And you're looking at funding opportunities or writing proposals, including customer discovery efforts and outcomes in your proposals can help to identify those specific objectives and problems that I mentioned before that it's useful for. So as an introduction to customer discovery, this process and the outcomes you get from it have wide applicability and high impact to advancing technology and supporting funding and partnerships in both the technology transfer process and sponsored program lifecycle. Now I'll turn this over to Stephen, who will go into the history of customer discovery.
Thank you, Tanya. So customer discovery has really come to us through the National Science Foundation Innovation Corps, or I-Corps program. And it was actually first developed by Steve Blank, who Tanya had mentioned earlier, during his time with Stanford University, creating the Lean Launchpad program. And this was a program directed to help software startups get better focus and improve their products before releasing them to the market using customer discovery sourced information. So the National Science Foundation, having seen his success, recruited Steve Blank to work with them, and in conjunction with VentureWell, they created the National I-Corps program, and this program has been very successful and is becoming integrated into the tech transfer offices and discipline across the country. And we see that, it's very beneficial for our startups. It helps them hone in on their particular market niche that will enable them to entree into the market. We see that it's also useful for us in conducting licensing activities in terms of identifying prospective licensees, as Tanya mentioned, and we also see that it has applicability to sponsored research programs. As Tanya mentioned, these startups don't need to be thought of as just a startup company. It can be any new endeavor, a project proposal, anything that's just getting underway, where information from the folks within the value chain will help coalesce a greater focus around the objectives that will be important to the people who will either fund it or who will benefit directly from it. And here in New York State, we have a couple other kind of clone programs. Nexus New York, one of them. PowerBridge New York is one downstate. And there are also other federal agency programs, and this has actually recently been mandated by federal law that the agencies that provide SBIR, STTR programs integrate I-Corps methodologies. So a little bit more on the background of National Science Foundation and the network that they've built. There are over 8 nodes these days, and we are fortunate in New York State to have 2 of those nodes, both the Regional Innovation Node in New York City and the Upstate New York Node, which is shared between U of R, RIT, and Cornell University. You can see with the blue stars, there are other nodes across the states, and we also have 87 sites. I think that may have recently increased to 88 or so. The sites are continuing to grow at a relatively faster rate, and we have several sites here in the SUNY system, and if any of you or your universities would be interested in learning more about what it takes to create a site program in conjunction with National Science Foundation, we'd be happy to help with that effort. So this program has, as you see, had over 1,100 teams come through, or about 450 of those teams have received funding upwards of $250 million that has followed on to the actual program funding of $50K to conduct customer discovery over a period of about 7 weeks. That's at the national node programs. The site programs are shorter programs. In some cases, programs can run from a couple of weeks to 7 weeks or so. And with the site programs, there is either no money or less money involved. And we find here that these programs can dovetail well with our own accelerator funds, our own seed funds, like the Technology Accelerator Fund, where we require customer discovery to have been completed. Well, it's not required, but it is highly encouraged, and it is one of the evaluation criteria. So this is all part of a grand master plan. So we'll move into some definitions and common terms here. Customer, we want to think, again, as Tanya mentioned, really broadly about this concept. It can be the end user. It can be the person who makes the purchase decision. It can be the person who writes the check. The person who makes that purchase decision and the person who writes the check aren't necessarily always the same person. We also want to think about customers as anyone in the value chain, either supply side, distribution side, people who participate in the value chain who can give you insights about how the potential beneficiaries of your technology or your solution, how they experience their everyday challenges and needs, and that information can greatly help inform the evolution and development of that solution, technology, product, as it were. Business model is really a plan or a set of hypotheses about how the company will be able to create value for itself. And again, we'll test those hypotheses using the business model canvas. And especially important to that process is the identification of value propositions, which are really concise, compelling statements about how your solution has competitive advantages over substitute solutions or products in the market, other research, what have you. So here's a quick diagram of the business model canvas. Again, really the most important part is finding the value proposition that is of interest to the customer segments. And again, with customer segments, we want to identify specific people, titles, roles, rather than 3M or Pfizer or I want to market this to big pharma. We need to get specific and identify particular people who will reach out to test our hypotheses about the value propositions that our solution brings. And here's another tool known as a product feature comparison chart. And this is a chart that's really helpful in identifying value propositions. It's really great when all of the green tick marks are lining up for your solution and that you're able to offer all of those features above and beyond your competitor product or solution with all of the red X marks. That's the ideal, and then once you see how your product compares to the others, you know which value propositions that you bring to the market and can communicate those to the prospective customers. Those are the citations for those figures, and here we have a diagram that depicts the idea, the concept of the pivot. We start out, with a proposal or a project or a startup company idea, and we think, it's going to be a straightaway shot. I know what I need to do to get to my goal, and then when we set out, reality sets in, and we need to adapt our activities and re-navigate as we go so that we can successfully navigate through the terrain as we find it changes on our way. So that's the idea of the pivot, which is essential to the customer discovery process. And I'll turn it now over to Tanya to speak about identifying prospective customers.
Thank you, Stephen. So how do we go about first identifying who our customers are and what they're like? We try to understand what's important to them and why they buy. What's important to note is that, customers do not exist to buy, but you exist to provide solutions to their problems. That was sort of the flip of why startups were failing before. So you want to think about how your technology or research outcome would fit into a product or service, and how many different companies would touch that product before it gets to the ultimate end user. In manufacturing, for example, there may be hundreds of parts made by 20 different companies that go into a heating system that then has system integrators and distributors involved before it reaches a homeowner. So it's important to understand where you fit in that scenario. So you make a guess or a hypothesis as to where you fit in, and then just start reaching out to people. Get an understanding from them if there are other factors you may be missing, and there are likely multiple parties involved in developing a product, there's influencers and people that might make decisions, but don't ultimately pay for the product, like Stephen mentioned before, and thinking about who a customer is. So it's also important to get a sense of who these people are, their position or title, age, nationality, if they have a budget, their motivations, likes and dislikes, even something as simple as whether they like coffee. Then you will take advantage of that information when you're marketing and communicating to them using your business model canvas. So how do you start? Make some guesses and just get out there. Start talking to people and revise and verify your hypotheses as you go along. How do you go about identifying your customers and their problems? Through interviews. Some of the best practices of interviewing are just to be bold, reach out to people even if you don't know them. You could hang out in the lobby of a business you're trying to talk with, stop by the front desk clerk, ask if they can help. A good tool is our Technology Transfer Transaction Toolbox, which has a number of tools to identify businesses, different markets, and the specific people and contact info you'll need. And then also key to this is asking for referrals. Referrals tend to be the best pathway to get to the person you really need to talk to inside a larger company. For example, if you're looking for a director of engineering or product development for a specific division, you might have to start with a salesperson and then work your way to get to the person you really need. What's really important, and we can't stress enough, is do not sell your product or service or technology. You don't want to talk about it in any way, shape, or form when you're first starting out in the first phases with interviews, because you don't want to bias the person you're speaking with by revealing or directing them in a certain way or revealing what your technology is. So the people you're interviewing will be a lot more open if you tell them you'd like their expertise to assist you with research. And, you know, it's key to really listen to them, ask open-ended questions, and allow that person to go into the direction of things that are on their mind. They often want to talk about their problems and woes and have you listen. So try to speak very little during the conversation. Okay, so it'd be great if we could hear from Betty Garcia-Mathewson. Betty, are you on the line with us? If you want to press #5.
So just go ahead.
Oh, there you are. Great. Hi, Betty.
Am I here now?
Yeah.
Okay.
Great.
Okay, great.
So, Betty, would you mind sharing with us a little bit about how you went about identifying customers to interview?
Absolutely. So when you create something, you create it in your context. So I created it within the context I work and could imagine how it was going to be used. And so I reached out to colleagues and people who knew people. I started with the idea that, you know, I primarily wanted to see my product in schools. And so it was really, as I said, reaching out to my networks. You can't just walk into an administrator's office or an educator's office and do an interview. So you have to make appointments. So that took a little bit longer, but finding the people to interview really is not that hard. It's about reaching out to people you know and them connecting you with others. I want to say also, I want to talk, we're going to get this a little out of order, but my baby is starting to wake up.
Okay.
Just letting everybody know here, I'm a new grandma and I'm here with a baby. My Arabella is in this webinar with me.
That's so awesome. Congratulations again. She's only a few days old, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
She's about 3 days old. So we really did make a pivot. They'll talk to you a little bit more about a pivot as this goes on during my customer discovery. This was a wonderful process. It really shifted. Yes, schools need what I have, but they don't have a pain point. Just the idea of a pain point. I need to solve somebody's problem. They need to know that it's a problem. And I realized in the school districts that at this point, people with our current structure, people do not see a problem in the way I see a problem. I did find people in the districts who thought it was what I believe to be a problem was a problem, but they're not the people who are going to pay. And so you know, really expanding my search, listening to my RF partners in technology transfer, and really looking at, you know, who else is out there in healthcare. There is more of a real pain point around ineffective interpretation. So it's not as if I'm throwing away my original customer, but if I want to get my product to market, which again is also a new way of thinking about things. I'm an educator. I develop things to make things easier, but the whole customer discovery process is something I will integrate into all of my proposals and projects moving forward. It really is a new way of thinking that tightens up, I think, your end product or program. And then finally, the last thing I would say is that the whole customer discovery, being involved in one of the courses is important. I saw myself and the other inventors in the course. We come in with a slice of the pie, like our perspective, what we've created it in, but the world is bigger than just us. And we were all really blind outside of the assumptions we had walking in and that surrounded us as we created things. It doesn't diminish the quality of what we created, but the customer discovery process really helps you to expand your vision of how things might be implemented. Because the bottom line is people need to feel that you're solving their problem, whether it's a curriculum or a product, whether it's nanotechnology or a program. People are not going to use it unless it does something to make their life better. So I guess that's my ditty all in one. And is that a good enough? How are we?
Yeah, that's so great, Betty. Thank you so much.
You bet.
Okay, all right. Thank you again, Betty. Okay,
you bet.
so
And I'm going to try and, somebody mute.
Yep, there we go. There we go. All right. Okay, so wonderful. All right, so let's look at a video now of things sort of not to do in an interview. This is a not so great interview.
Hi, my name is Joe from the Research Foundation for the State University of New York. I'm developing a gel that could be incorporated into a running shoe insert for people with knee problems in order to get your feedback. Would you mind answering a few questions?
That sounds great. I would love to talk.
Wonderful. Could you please tell me what company you work for and explain your role there?
Yes, my name is Craig and I supervise product development for cleats at Running USA, so there might be some crossover to running shoes. I have been with the company for about 1.5 years now, so I am pretty new.
Great. We are developing a shoe with a special insert to reduce impact when the foot strikes the ground. Do you think that this is something that would sell?
I am sure that there is a market for this type of shoe, but it is not something that I am personally involved with.
Wonderful. Is there anything that you can see as beneficial in this technology?
Well, I am not really sure, as my main role is developing high-end cleats to be worn specifically by professional soccer players.
Okay, thank you. Do you think that a price of $150 is reasonable?
Well, our cleats sell for $200, so it seems reasonable.
Thank you for your time.
Okay, great. All right, so what were some of the issues with that? Let's go back.
Yeah.
Some of the issues with that interview. So in the introduction, Joe didn't mention anything about doing research. He immediately started selling his technology, talking about his technology. And then he asked Craig what company he works for. So he should have already known what company he worked for and done some research and known that ahead of time. Also, Craig was sort of newer to the company, so may not have provided as much feedback as would be good for someone that's been there for a while. And Craig was really not the right person for Joe to be interviewing because he was product development for cleats, not running shoes. So Craig's main customer was expert soccer players, who's not the same customer as what Joe is looking for. And you see in multiple occasions, Joe really wasn't listening to Craig. Craig said he does not have expertise in this area. He became annoyed and sleepy and began making guesses just to appease Joe. So since Craig was not the expert Joe needed, it would have been great for him to ask for a referral for someone that might have more expertise. So I included a summary sort of that feedback in the slides for you to look for later. But now let's go to an example of a good interview.
Joe Smith, faculty and inventor of the gel material to absorb force, and his co-inventor, Sydney Jones, a PhD student, are interviewing Mary Higgins from a specialty shoe company.
Hi, my name is Joe from the Research Foundation for the State University of New York. I am here with my student, Sydney. We are doing some research for the National Science Foundation and are looking to get some insight on the running shoe market. Do you have 10 to 15 minutes to talk?
Hi, Joe and Sydney. It's nice to meet you. Yes, I have 10 to 15 minutes now and would love to help.
It's nice to meet you too, Mary.
Great. Thank you, Mary. To start, could you please tell me about yourself and your role with Running USA?
I am the Senior Research and Development Engineer for our Running and Walking Shoe Department. I have been with the company now for 20 years and have seen our shoes develop significantly over the years as new technology is developed.
Great. Thank you, Mary. Who might your company's main customers be?
From our sales, it appears that the company sells roughly 40% walking shoes and 60% running shoes. My understanding from interacting with our sales department is that our walking shoes customers tend to come from all walks of life with lots of families, while our running shoes customers tend to be more into outdoor sports or athletes.
Do you know how the company does most of its sales?
Until about 10 years ago, most of our sales were done in sporting goods stores. Now, the majority of our sales are done direct online. I would say maybe 65% actually. The majority of our remaining sales are done in specialty running stores with a small percentage still at your typical sporting goods store.
Okay, thank you. On average, how much do your shoes sell for?
Our walking shoes range in price from $50 to $75, and our running shoes range from $75 to $200, depending on what type of shoe you are looking for. The customers looking for the higher-end shoes want quality and good support, which is why they are more expensive.
That makes sense. Could you please tell me a little bit more about the types of shoes you offer?
Yes. We offer both running and walking shoes, including trail shoes, for people who do a lot of running and walking on trails in the woods. This also includes street shoes and even indoor and outdoor track shoes for competitive runners.
Sounds like you offer quite a variety of products. Is there anything you know of that customers are looking for in their shoe?
Yes. Currently, we are seeing a need for a shoe for customers who have a lot of knee pain when they run or walk. We are looking into ways to make our shoes take up more force when the foot hits the ground to reduce some impact on the runner or walker's knees.
That's interesting. How many of your customers seem to be experiencing the knee pain?
I would guess about 30%, but I'm not the expert on that. My colleague, Greg, in sales, might be able to help you more with that question.
Thank you, Mary. We have been talking for about 15 minutes now, and we do not want to take up much more of your time. It sounds like Greg might be an expert that would be great to speak with as well. Would you be willing to introduce us to him?
You're welcome, and yes, no problem. I'll send an introductory email and connect the both of you.
Thank you, Mary. It was an absolute pleasure speaking with you today. If we have any more questions, would it be okay if we followed up with you?
Yes, certainly. I'd be happy to help you. Have a great rest of your day.
Okay, great. So differences you see in this one, Joe mentioned he and Sydney were doing research. Joe knew the company and generally what Mary did, prior to the meeting. He asked open-ended questions that gave great info about customers, sales channels, market size pricing, and really problems that customers were facing with knee pain. And Mary was really the right person to speak to in terms of the knee pain. You're looking for credibility. She had the right title, years of experience. And Sydney was there to take notes and be a timekeeper. So it's important when you're doing these interviews, try to have two people so you can get good insights later. And they also got a referral for another person in the company, and they asked to follow up at a later time with questions. Okay, great. Okay, so there's the summary for you to refer to later. Okay, So here's the business model canvas again that we've been talking about. We've mentioned this a couple of times. So customer segments and value propositions are the two that we're sort of focusing on for right now. There's also customer relationships, how you're going to build your relationships with customers. Channels we mentioned a few times, trying to understand where you fit. Key activities is in your project or with a startup, what are the key things that you're going to do? Are you going to manufacture, or are you more of a service company? What resources you have, whether it's IP or money or facilities, and then key partners. So thinking about who a strategic partner would be that you want to form a long-term relationship with to develop your research or technology later. Okay, then customer segments, we talked a bit about this before, but essentially what you would put in this box here on this one-pager is the specific individuals and their titles. So say, Craig at Pfizer, and his title is Director of Operations. And then think about what are their needs and dislikes, where do they buy, motivations, that type of thing. And value proposition, we've mentioned a number of times. So, customers don't necessarily care about your technology. They really want you to solve their problems. So you want to tell them what your product or service is, how it differs from others, why people want to buy it, and not just list the features. Some types of value propositions, you could talk about being more efficient, lower cost, simpler, better bundling, better distribution, faster, that type of stuff. And then here's an example template of a value proposition from NSF. So for your target customer who wants or needs a compelling reason to buy, the product name is a product category that provides a key benefit, unlike some competitor. And here's an example for you. So for project managers at drone manufacturing companies that want to minimize their downtime of operating drones, the wireless charging station provides simultaneous charging of multiple drones at a faster rate than currently offered solutions. So that would be something you want to communicate to this target customer of project managers at drone manufacturing companies. Examples of hypotheses that you would want to test in when you're putting together your business model canvas and thinking about what it is that the information you want to gather from these interviews. Here's a couple examples of hypotheses to test. So there are some terms that are called painkillers, and there's also gain creators. So painkillers essentially are really solving a pain or problem that your customer has. So you're hypothesizing that your technology provides solves a customer problem by reducing or eliminating wasted effort, ending difficulties or challenges that they're up at night thinking about, or wiping out negative social consequences. And then gain creators, so a couple examples here. So instead of solving a problem specifically, it's creating more of a benefit. So you can create savings of time, make the customer's job or life easier, or create positive consequences that the customer desires. And now I'll turn it over to Stephen, who will talk a little bit more about business model fit, problem solution fit.
Sure thing. All right, so this drawing here depicts the concept of the startup advancing through various fit mechanisms that are enabled by the business model canvas. And first we start off with the problem solution fit. As we mentioned previously, it's really important, it's of primary importance to match the value proposition with the customer segment. And that validates problem solution fit. Next, we move on to a product market fit, where other aspects of the business model canvas are involved. You're actually delivering a product and service that the customer needs and they're paying you for it. And finally, we have the business model fit, where the entire business model is at play and you have validated that you can build a valuable, scalable, and repeatable business. Again, the concept of minimum viable product or minimum viable prototype, this is important here, as we saw in the last figure at stage 2, where you have a prototype that you're using to gain feedback from actual customers. You want a product with just enough features to get that feedback. And so this diagram just shows that a scooter or a wheel are not sufficient minimum viable prototypes for an automobile to get appropriate feedback from a customer. You could start off with, a cab on a set of 4 wheels, and then advance to a flatbed truck, possibly then to an automobile. And then you see the next, column, there were subtle features that weren't dialed in, like the color, the hubcaps, things of that nature. For university research, we really play in the first 2 columns because we're not actually in the business of making and selling products. So our technology is usually very early stage, column 1, column 2. We have a series of questions now that we'll address for some of our guests.
Okay. All right. Do we have Ann Baldwin with us? Ann, if you just hit #5.
Can you hear me now?
Yes. Great.
Okay, good.
Great. Welcome, Ann. So if you could share with us, where do you see customer discovery fitting into the pre-award function sponsored programs?
Well, first I want to thank you because I don't know how many people are sort of new to this process, but our office certainly is. And I found the way you framed things in the beginning allowed me to sort of make a cognitive leap to understand this a lot better and appreciate it. So I think there's a lot of potential for our faculty members. We often have faculty members coming to us with ideas, and I think that our office, with this information is able to really provide the basics for getting started in seeking out feedback that they need. And I realized as you were starting that, even with regular proposals, we kind of do this to an extent, like looking at guidelines and prior funding. And this is sort of the next practical step for our faculty members in actually identifying a product or service market. So I think this has been very valuable for us. We've been finding that our sort of tech transfer startup opportunities are really allowing our students to have some tremendously beneficial and absolutely truly high impact sort of applied and integrative learning experiences. So it's something we really want to encourage. Some of our students may make lifelong careers out of this type of activity. So it's been very rewarding for us and very helpful to our faculty members as well who involve students. What else can I say? I think as funding tends to get tighter, we do need to look for other opportunities for our faculty members to go after the things they're interested in pursuing. And sort of tech transfer and startup companies are a whole nother venue for them. And so I think this information will help us guide them in that direction when it's appropriate.
Great. Thank you so much, Ann. Okay, so, and we already heard from Betty about her experience as well in going through the pivot. So I'd like to open up to questions from the audience. Did we have any questions in the chat? Do you know, Stephen?
I'm going to go up to either chat. Let's see.
If anyone has a question, feel free to hit #5 or put the question into the chat box.
You can unmute everybody.
Yeah, okay.
For now.
Okay, so everyone is unmuted.
Tanya, this is Ann again.
Yeah.
I wondered what university was it that has their faculty members create a customer discovery plan?
University of New Hampshire?
New Hampshire, University of New Hampshire, yeah. Mark Cleedham was the presenter at the autumn course, yeah.
Yeah, that seems like a really valuable tool. I'm definitely going to check that out.
Great. There's also a lean canvas and an opportunity canvas. So Judy Albers has an opportunity canvas, and then there's a lean canvas on our Innovation and Partnerships website. There's a link to that. So there's a couple different versions where the lean canvas has a column for problem and solution that might be a little more applicable if you're not doing a startup, but it's a really good tool, I think.
Hi, Tanya. It's Amy Coates calling from Central Office.
Great.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, great. I actually had a question. In terms of a researcher, trying to reach out to get interviews and to speak with potential customers, could they send proxies in their stead as well? Like, if they have people out there asking questions on their behalf, do you think that that's a good idea, or should they not be doing that?
Yeah, so I would say generally we have teams with faculty and students, and as well our tech transfer staff and sponsored program staff go out and can be involved with interviews or conduct interviews. So I think it definitely makes sense for them also to be conducting research and learning more about the technology and market.
Thanks.
Thank you. Any others? Okay, do you want to advance the slides to the next?
Did you?
And Stephen, we had one question for you. Maybe if you could elaborate on, could the customer discovery support the creation and protection of intellectual property?
Sure, I'd be happy to speak to that. So I actually participated as an entrepreneurial lead for a team from Alfred State University that went through the Nexus New York program, and it was for a water-based green air conditioner that we were pretty sure was going to have great market success because it did not rely on global warming greenhouse gases for the refrigerant to support the refrigeration process. And so we started contacting people in the industry, and they really turned a deaf ear to that idea. They essentially said, what's with this untested, unproven technology? What you're asking us to take on this technology, and by the way, these potential regulations that you're talking about to phase out or phase down these gases won't come into effect for another 10 to 15 years at the very earliest. And so we are a little disheartened, and we began to eventually hear from folks who were interested in thermally activated cooling, or the ability to use waste heat to enhance the performance of an air conditioner. And we heard from Emerson Climate Technologies, actually, that this thermally activated cooling was a strategic component of their technology development. And so we were actually able to take that information, integrate that ability to utilize waste heat into our patent application as it came time to convert from a provisional to a full patent application. And that was really the time at which, as a patent attorney, I drank the Kool-Aid and said, this process can bring information to me and the inventors that I serve that will help us improve our intellectual property position. And so been adherent ever since, and I think it's a really great process and can, in addition to many other things, really help us hone in on important aspects of intellectual property for protection.
Great, thank you. Would you want to advance the slide?
Sure.
Okay, so here's some resources for you if you want to learn more about NSF I-Corps programs, or Steve Blank, the Udacity link will give you a lot about the curriculum and especially of the I-Corps program and learning about Lean Launchpad. There's Talking to Humans, which is a really great short resource, and also there's VentureWell's website. If you want to click one more. And then here's our contact information. And I want to thank our special guests, Betty Garcia Mathewson and Ann Baldwin, as well as our host, Jamie Frakes, who for all the work that she did and her team putting this together, the presentation for us today. And Jamie, do you have any final housekeeping things?
So this presentation or this recording will be available to everyone that registered. If you didn't register, you can always shoot me an email. My email matches Tanya's and Stephen's. It's jamie.frakes@rfsuny.org. It should also be on your registration. I can send you a link to the recording if you want to share it with any of your colleagues.
And we'll be following up with the survey as well, right?
Yep.
Okay, great. Thank you so much, everyone. Have a great day.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye.